Dr. Sohom, Das, part 3.
I want to touch on drugs really quickly, right? So
Sure.
with me, I just know that the only difference between drugs is that some are legal and some are illegal. In essence, the reaction that you get from consuming somewhat is the same, I guess. So you experience some kind of high, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I wouldn't. You can. There's lots of ways you can split it up. I wouldn't say illegal versus legal is the scientifically easiest way to split it up. I'd say like you got your uppers, your amphetamines, and you got like downers and weed.
Yeah.
And you have alcohol, which is a different thing.
I mean, it's going to compromise your sobriety,
yeah,
I guess.
absolutely,
in
of course.
some way. So
that's the whole point, right?
yeah, for sure. Now, me, I'm not a user of anything myself because I'm just fucking scared. Even the prescription stuff in it, like you see a lot more with today. People have sort of made this transition from regular drugs. I'm talking about abusing it to, well, not regular, but like the common ones like weed, coke, or whatever, and going on to abuse prescription drugs.
Yeah.
Because I guess that's easier to sort of get from over the counter, but they're proven to be more fatal. I think with the whole Xanax, Percocets, and whatever else they're sort of using, right? So, I mean, how ultimately how do they work? Because things like antidepressants, things like I guess Xanax is a form of this.
It's a benzodiazepine, so it's more of a sedative than it is an
Right.
antidepressant.
So the way that it works, as far as its its functions, when it does it like I guess the receipt in your brain or something, it just like you high or something, so you're distracted away from your
So with antidepressants, it's all about neurotransmitters.
Yeah.
So as I'm sure you know, there's some neurotransmitters like dopamine that cause you happiness.
Absolutely.
So antidepressants work by stopping these receptors. They stop the reuptake of those things. So they usually get these neurotransmitters usually get absorbed into cells, go through a cycle, and then spat back out. But they stop them getting reabsorbed, so there's more in the gaps in between cells in the synapses. So over time, and it does take time, it takes several weeks, you get more levels of dopamine, noradrenaline in between these synapses, so it makes you feel happier. So that's antidepressants. Something like Xanax or benzodiazepines, they just work on these specific receptors, but they calm you down and they make you a lot less sort of docile. They'll lower your blood pressure, lower your heart rate, but they give you a bit of a buzz, which is why people take them, especially if you mix them with alcohol.
Crazy.
So they can make you high, but they all have different types of high. So the high that you get off of a Xanax or a benzodiazepine is very different from coke, it's very different from weed. But ultimately, they make you feel better temporarily.
Yeah.
Which is why
I mean,
people
for
do them.
me, that's fucking scary. Only because like I'm someone, I've got an addictive personality. Number one, and second, I feel like I used to even I think caffeine is a drug. I really feel that way because I used to abuse coffee like crazy, but I never liked what it used to do to me because it created this mad dependency. Like people who drink coffee, like I've noticed, right? They don't just drink one cup. Like they're reeing up every 2 fucking seconds. You're like, bro, like that's like cup number 11 or 12. Bro. It's like, do you know what I mean? And I don't want that. I don't want that type of dependency. Obviously, some people need it, but you just can't help. I mean, when you're, I guess, taking these pills and abusing them, I guess you can't help but feed the dependency sort of thing. If that makes sense.
So for most substances, if you take them long enough, it doesn't happen like only for a few hits or a few doses. But if you take them long enough, you get both psychological and a physiological dependency.
For sure.
So when you have a physiological dependency, and I know a lot about this because I've been trying to quit nicotine for years now, and I keep going through phases.
For sure.
It's fine for for me, for nicotine, for like 12 hours or 24 hours, and after that, you start getting this like actual just withdrawal symptoms. So you start feeling anxious, your heart sort of increases, you get this like yearning and this craving. So
anxieties and stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. So that happens with pretty much most drugs. For some it's more than others, so obviously heroin is a huge one in terms of physical withdrawal compared to something like cannabis, for example. But then there's a psychological addiction as well. So if you're used to being high, then you feel like something's missing when you're sober.
Do you know what I mean? And this thing's going to make everything better sort of thing, innit? So, do you know what I mean? Fucking nuts. And I guess what don't help as well, like music, right? I've always known music and drugs to be so synonymous, right? Always having an association with each other. Obviously, we're fans of hip hop, so obviously, the hip hop that I grew up listening to, it was more distribution and dealing, and I'm not saying go out and do it, but you know what I mean, not condoning it, but that's what it was. But now I feel like the transition has been made from dealing to using. Like people rap more or they make music more about abusing drugs, and it's these prescription ones.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna go on a bit of a limb and say I think they're worse.
Yeah.
The ones sort of over the counter sort of
Yeah,
thing.
I suppose it depends which ones, but opioids in general.
Right. So you spoke about heroin. Now people, I guess, people need to know what's in sort of certain stuff, because I don't know if you heard of codeine, like lean.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with that.
Is that like cough syrup and codeine mixed together?
Yeah, pretty much. So that, if we look at the atomic sort of build-up, it's opiates, which would mean it's heroin. It's liquid heroin, what you're consuming. Yeah. Even when, like, because I know people that do lean, and when they don't, the withdrawals are mad. It's like, yo, are you putting needles in your fucking leg? Like, what's going on?
I didn't know people did lean in the UK.
What? It's crazy. It's crazy.
I know it's a popular thing in South America, but I didn't know.
Oh yeah, no, it's crazy out here, proper. And it's like, so as I said with the music thing, and I guess that's what's probably encouraging people to be more accepting of abusing fucking drugs. Like,
yeah, it's weird because I've got to admit I know very little about modern day hip hop. I've tried it, but it's just not for me. I'm an old fuddy duddy man. I'm in my 40s. I do try and listen to new school hip hop. I just can't get into it.
Sure.
But the rap that I used to listen to, obviously they talk about smoking weed all the time. Pretty much every single song mentioned.
Yeah.
But it's almost like being into anything else is kind of looked down upon. So crack, absolutely. Even I can remember like some house pain rappers talking about never doing cocaine and blah, blah, blah. And like the way they talked about it was if you did that, then you're a bit of a loser.
Like.
Yeah, but like you're a loser of society that's just like an addict. Whereas, as you say, a lot of the new school sort of rap that I'm not into but I have listened to. They talk about lean and getting messed up.
Yeah, and I just can't identify with that stuff because it's like, wait, this is not what you should be perpetrating, man. It's not right practically, innit? Yeah, nuts. All right, cool. So, Doc, so you're into doing assessments when it comes to people, and just touching on certain like known people, right? So there's a particular individual. I'm not his biggest fan, so I'm gonna try and reserve, how I feel about him as much as I can. But someone like a Kanye West, I don't know how familiar you are as far as what his antics and what he's been doing lately. Like, how would you, as far as an assessment, what do you think? I don't say what's wrong with him or like why what's encouraging these sort of outbursts that he's having.
Kanye's a very interesting character. I know a bit about him. I don't know if I've kept up to what he's done very recently, but certainly over the years I've seen that recent documentary on him, I think on Netflix.
Yeah, I refuse to watch it, but yeah.
A bit like, how I was saying before that Ronnie Cray is unique because unlike most people, his sensitivity, paranoia within his line of work being like a well-respected, well-feared gangster allows him to do that. I think we get something quite similar with Kanye. So he's been diagnosed with bipolar affective disorder. We all know that, right? And
is that an actual mental illness? Or?
Yeah. So I'll briefly tell you what that is. So bipolar affective disorder is, so bipolar means you go to two extremes. So they have periods of depression.
Right.
We all know what depression is: low mood, low energy, not enjoying anything, poor concentration, etc., etc. Mania is it's almost like the opposite of that. So people are either really irritable or really elevated in their mood. And they move really quickly, they have all these racing thoughts, they say very grandiose things. So grandiose things is in they're special, they have powers, or they're really popular, really good looking. There's a very sort of typical beliefs when you're suffering from mania. They tend to be speeded up, tend to be quite impulsive, so they do things that they later regret, like they spend loads of money on things they don't need, or they're sexually promiscuous, or they even self-harm, or they just do something that's completely impulsive and out of character for them. And then you have periods of euthymia where you're normal in between. So that's those three stages are bipolar. So what I think is really unusual about Kanye is that I think even before the bipolar hit, he was already a very narcissistic and grandiose individual, which is kind of, and like it's easy for me to sit here and criticize that, but I actually think that's what makes him quite interesting. Certainly helped him get on in the music industry because
I mean, you ain't got to be an a-hole, bro, innit? It's not like for me. That's just
what I was going to say is I think he became an a-hole. I think originally he was really driven, really motivated, and quite grandiose, quite into himself. Self-belief I think he had originally. So originally he had these personality traits and he needed them to become who he was. But I think gradually over time his natural personality traits have changed because he is now a superstar rapper. So he can say things and do things and get away with it. Plus his bipolar has kicked in as well, so now he gets stages of being manic. So for example, if you're an ordinary person, you become, I don't know, sexually disinhibited or even just financially disinhibited, and you want to go and blow fucking hundreds of thousands of pounds or something, and you want to go out and get laid, you'd really struggle. But if you're Kanye West, you don't struggle doing that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I think that his antics are part personality and part mental illness, but probably more than that, they've been kind of encouraged by his position of being the superstar, one of the most famous people in the world, so he can kind of do what he wants to do. And I think people excuse his behaviour because he's so zany and so wacky. If he says something that someone else would get fired for or punched for, he gets away with it because
slavery
Kanye
was a
West.
choice.
Exactly, yeah.
What an idiot.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a perfect example. If Bob from Accountant said that, he would not have a job the next day.
You feel me? Yeah.
You have somebody like Kanye says that, and obviously a lot of people.
You got people like thinking about like, oh, maybe it was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like,
exactly. Yeah. So at worst, people will insult him and criticize him as they rightly should, but also there'll be people that just think, oh, he's so interesting, he's so cool, and he's so edgy.
Mate, yeah, that's the problem that I have, because it's like, I mean, I get it, you're famous, you're whatever, but like you ain't got to fucking talk out your ass, like sort of, and certain comments that you're making, I just don't understand, and the antics on top of it. And what really gets me about him is that obviously I understand the mental side of things. Obviously, he's not. There's things that he's going through.
Yeah.
But why do you keep having the same problem as far as wanting to establish yourself? You've established yourself. I think the guy's not gotten over people not believing in him back then.
Yeah.
That's why I'm not too in tune with wanting to see the documentary, because everyone's like, oh, you should watch it because, you know, he was trying to tell people about, and it's like, that happens to everyone, bro. Like, no one's going to be a believer. People need to see some shit before they start co-signing you, sort of thing, right?
Yeah. I did see the documentary, and I have to say I enjoyed it because this is the Kanye before he turned into a bit of a caricature. Cool. So it's before he became, in my eyes,
and ironically, that's the Kanye that I like.
Yeah. But it's just that he had all the self-belief, and nobody, even after he got signed to like Rockefeller, Dame Dash couldn't care less about him.
Like, go make a beat, bro. What do you mean you want to rap? Just
Jay-Z's
shitting on him,
ignoring him. And so I really, that kind of, as somebody who's trying to like break it in the world of YouTube, I know what it's like to like spend hours doing something and then not get any recognition for it.
For sure.
So I really like that aspect of him, but I can't deny that he's grown out of control now, and he's not he was, in that documentary, he's really likable. In real life now, in 2022, he's not very likable.
Bro, like you said, you put it amazing. You know, the documentary, I guess, is there to serve that purpose. But I'm on some, I don't give a toss, mate. Like he's an a-hole. Like, do you know what I mean? And on top of it, there's no need for him to be that way. I really feel that way. It's one thing you're going through something, but stop. Just, you know what I mean? The comments and all that, just stop it. Like, you know what I mean?
But it's like, what is his motivation to stop? He is pissing a lot of people off, but he's also that keeps him famous. The more we talk about him, the more his brand is worth.
I mean,
so
he I'll give it to him. He is an absolute genius when it comes to Graduation, Late Registration. Those albums, phenomenal. Production for like Jay-Z's Blueprint 1 and 2 songs he produced on there, phenomenal. Like I give him his flowers, but you're a prick, mate. You know what I mean? I just don't know, like drawing the line somewhere.
Yeah.
But just talk about someone else as well, like Tupac Shakur, right?
Yeah.
The thing with Tupac, I think, like, as far as I've seen, you know, interviews, documentaries and stuff like that, that is one impulsive geezer.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, he's all the way, like, nah, there's no thought process. Like, fucking, like, it's all full steam ahead, like, sort of thing.
He's really passionate. I think out of everybody that we've talked about, I'd say Tupac probably, doesn't have any kind of mental illness or personality disorder.
You reckon?
I think he's got personality traits. Impulsiveness is one of them, passion is one of them. You could say he's quite reckless and callous, I suppose, to a degree. Like, you know, hit him up and making comments of getting killed, and probably did get him killed. But I suppose for me, it's really hard to know how much of that is his actual personality and how much of that is bravado. And maybe he in himself and his mind, the two sort of, the boundary blurred a little bit. And that might have what got him killed.
Do you believe that, like, when, like, with actors in particular, right, when they assume a role, it's hard for them to get away from that role?
I think, are you talking about his role as Bishop in
Absolutely,
Juice?
You know I was going with it.
Yeah, I'm sure it must happen, right? Because enough people have reported it to happen. So it must be a thing.
A lot of people are saying after that movie, he was not the same.
But then I think I can't profess to be an expert, but I think he was going that way anyway. Like, it was already in his music. The thing that's really weird about Tupac to me is that there's a disconnect. There's two parts of him, a dichotomy. Part of him is really socially conscious and cares about his people, so, you know, poor black people.
Absolutely.
And, you know, he's made a lot of very political statements. I believe his mum was associated with Black Panthers, so that's definitely part of his identity. But on the other hand,
Shakur.
Yeah, absolutely. But on the other hand, there's another part of him that's kind of a bit of a thug and a bit sort of selfish and a bit narcissistic, talking about shagging women all the time and blah blah blah, and very misogynistic. And, you know, I'm not having a go because I like his music and I listen to it. But I'm just saying that you can't. It's hard now that I'm a bit older to know what I think about him, because there's this really respectable part of him, but there's also quite a childish, nasty part of him. I mean, it's entertaining. Like, Hit 'Em Up's a perfect example, but I mean, what he said was
I mean, like
so
they call it
excusable,
they call it the best diss song ever. I don't think so, because for me, he was just like he's one of the greatest rappers, but he was just yelling abuse, mate, at that point. You know what I mean? It's like he was just trying to be as malicious as possible.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I've done this to your wife. You ain't nobody. I'm gonna, you know what I mean? And it's like, okay, like cool, bro. Like,
I think you've hit the nail on the head. There was a malice behind it, wasn't there?
That's it. Like,
the other thing that I
it's
wonder,
not like an Ether by Nas, right?
The other thing I wonder is whether hanging out with Suge sort of was a really bad influence. So
you know what I mean?
he wasn't. I mean, Tupac was an intelligent sort of person who was raised to be politically conscious.
100%.
He was a part-time actor. He went to ballet school, I believe, and then he starts hanging around with Suge Knight, and then he becomes this like gangster pretty quickly.
Gangbanger, like, yeah.
So I'm not trying to say he's intentionally fake, because I think he's too strong a character to be that.
Yeah.
But I wonder whether he got confused about what he really was.
I feel like he has this energy, right? That is, like I said, it's full steam ahead. So whatever, where that's put in, that's what it's gonna be. So if it's the civil rights sort of guy, full steam ahead, like all the way, like yeah, our people, whatever. If it's being with the Suge Knights and the Mob Piru and the Bloods and stuff, like then yeah, that's what it is. Because even leading up to his death, it's speculated that it was a gang issue.
Yeah.
As far as what got him killed, because the person who was in the MGM or Las Vegas, whatever, he was a rival to the gang that Tupac is his associates are.
And Tupac beat him up that same day.
Just literally, the guy said to him, "Yeah, that's that guy that tried to rob my chain in the mall." Tupac was like, "What? Okay." Walks, punches him in the face, and they all jump him, like literally in that sort of fashion.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. It's like it's this energy where it's like.
I think that's. I get what you mean. He's got this energy, and you know, he's obviously full of self-confidence. And he thinks that he can't be touched. He probably thinks he's invincible. But I think it's really dangerous when you get people like Tupac or anybody that's a celebrity to mix with those gangs, because they're really about that life.
100%.
Like, I'm not saying Tupac wasn't, and I'm sure he could stand his own, but he wasn't like born into a gang.
Tupac is the money though. Like you shouldn't be punching people. You're the money. You're the meal ticket, bro. Innit? Like, relax. Do you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, sorry, not to cut you off.
Well, I just think I don't know this for facts. Obviously, I can't really say 100% without interviewing him in person, but I do wonder how confused he got between what he was rapping about and what he actually was.
Great point.
Because even though he hung out with gangsters and he hung out with Suge, and as I say, I'm sure he could hold his own in a fight. He didn't grow up in a gang like a lot of the people that he was associated with. The person that he beat up, I'm sure. People that probably ended up killing him, I'm sure.
Mate.
So you got to be careful, because they're not about saying it on record. They're actually about
Nah, because even the guy that he killed, or not killed, sorry, Orlando Anderson, being the guy that ended up killing him, he had a reputation. Like, this guy was a known marksman. Like, you got in trouble with this guy, he's not going to come knocking. He's going to boot your door down.
And also, there's not really a need for it for Tupac, is there? Because if you're a gang member, your family are gang members, and that's where you live, and you have no other options, then you kind of have to live that life, because if you don't stand up for yourself and if you're seen to be weak, then you're going to be shot all over, you're going to be a victim, you're going to be bullied. Whereas Tupac is good for his identity and it fits in with some of his music, but he doesn't need to do that. He's a multi-millionaire.
That's my point, yeah.
He's a really talented guy, really good looking actor, rapper. He could, have any woman he wants, live anywhere in America or in the world where he wants.
He's as popular as Coca-Cola. Like, they got pictures of him in Brazil, Germany, like everyone knows Tupac, bro. Like,
so it was like he had a choice to be completely distant from that if he wanted to. Whereas people that are really in that life, they don't have that choice.
Interesting. And then, so just touching on like a community that I come from in particular, right? Call it whatever, quote unquote, the hood, the ghetto, whatever, right? So, some of the medical conditions over there, you hear the term PTSD a lot, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah. In
a lot of, I guess it's prevalent amongst like youth, like in late teens even, right? Because of the experiences that people have to face when they're there. Now, you've assessed a lot of, I guess, young people, and they talk about, you spoke about them carrying a knife and all this stuff, and it's like, for me, I don't know where the cycle sort of breaks, because I'm interested in psychology. I'm starting to learn a few things about how this is sort of impacting the community as far as what the climate is outside. Surely must be deteriorating the mind of these youths and everyone who's there, and it's just negativity is just breeding negativity sort of thing. So I don't know what's your take on that sort of thing.
On what, how to stop it?
Yeah, or just even like the cycle, because for me it's just getting worse. Like,
I suppose it's really hard in some communities to get rid of it, isn't it? because if you grow up in an environment, a bit like what we were just talking about the gang members, if you grow up in an environment where there are loads of gangs around, there's loads of violence around, first of all, it normalises it, right? So what the quote-unquote normal person thinks is completely irresponsible behaviour, like carrying a knife, that's a perfect example. If everyone around you does that, then it normalises it. It doesn't seem that weird, number one. Number two, you kind of feel that you have to do it for your own safety, potentially. Not everybody, but certainly some people in some states. And then if you don't have any other kind of authority figures or father figures, for example, which is quite common, then you might feel that you have to join a gang, because if you don't, it's either that or be a victim.
For sure.
You'd rather be a perpetrator than a victim if you had to choose one of the two.
Sure.
So I think the cycle kind of perpetuates itself. Plus you throw in like really limited job opportunities, poverty, and you see people that can make money really, really easily by doing very little. Then you want to emulate them. Why wouldn't you? You know, if it's either that or working like a minimum wage job, it's really easy to see how that kind of lifestyle is tempting. So it's really clear how there's so many kind of temptations or triggers that can continue the cycle. As to how to deal with it, that's really difficult. And I think it's ultimately about money. Everything that needs a solution in society is about money and funding in some way.
Unfortunately.
But where do you put that money in? Some people would argue it'd be the police, but then if the police get overhanded, then that just causes an even bigger disconnect, and then those used from those kind of backgrounds feel even more marginalised and isolated, so that doesn't help. Probably youth centres and youth service, so as we all know, there's been massive cuts of that over the last few years, the last couple of decades. I think youth just need an alternative.
For me, I feel like it's got to begin in the mind. Like, people need to see stuff for what it actually is. So, you know, people talk about, oh, you know, it's good to have therapy and to speak to someone and stuff like that. I think that is good, but people, as far as even in my community, like, they've been through a lot of stuff in it. Yeah. And nothing really ever improves. As you said, they've taken away youth centres. There's not a lot of opportunities there. And when the mind sort of deteriorates, I feel like the physical, the body starts to follow, sort of thing, innit? So I feel like something's got to click upstairs first in order for people to understand that we just need to sort of do better.
Yeah, I agree.
And the illnesses, I guess, it don't help, like the PTSDs.
Yeah. So like regardless of any sort of poverty-stricken areas in general, the funding for mental health services is far lower than it should be. So for the percentage of money that the mental health services get from the NHS in terms of funding, it's far lower than the actual burden on the NHS. Yeah. That's in all areas. And then you throw in like socioeconomic disadvantage, it's even more pronounced there. So yeah, more access to healthcare, more sort of therapy. I think it might not be the most popular thing to say, but this is what I personally feel. I think parents need to take more responsibility for raising their children. You know, I'm a father, I've got 2 kids. I feel if I can't see this happening, but hypothetically speaking, if one of my kids got into trouble through whatever violence offending, I would feel personally responsible for that. Yeah. I wouldn't say it's just society, it's just what he sees.
I'll even go as far as to say I feel like we need to be responsible for our communities also. It's like, who you relying on? The government. Obviously, you've seen what they've done. As you said, the lack of funding for even mental health. Why are you relying on them? Like, let's try and take control of our communities ourselves, sort of thing. Yeah.
It's easy to say, it's harder to do that because you need buy-in from
it's the mental, bro. Like, I mean, I'm here with a professional psychiatrist. I'm sure you feel me on that one. It's upstairs, bro, man. Like, something's got to switch upstairs, man. Yeah, for sure. And even the whole like men's mental health sort of thing, innit? I mean, it's now becoming such a commercial thing for me, and I don't want to talk about it like in a detrimental way, but that's how I feel it is now. It's topic of discussion. Oh, it's gonna get attention, and half the time I feel like people don't know what they're talking about when it comes to men's mental health a little bit. I feel like obviously, you know, there's a lot of struggles we have as men. One of them I feel in particular would be like masculinity, or, you know, what's the true, you know, definition or feeling of being masculine, right? Yeah. And this I feel like gets distorted, and then that's when sort of you might have your anxieties and stuff like that. The whole alphaism and stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, we're human beings. Again, I feel like our strongest asset to us is our mind, right? And how this is utilized would go on to determine your success more so than you being able to fucking knock out 20 guys in a row. That's not something you can really put on your CV. Do you know what I mean? That's not masculine. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like these sort of conversations need to be had amongst men though, right? Because, you know, obviously not to shit on females enough, but I'm just saying it's a lot more, they're talking about it more than we are. Yeah. If that makes sense. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, I think I'd like to, I don't know if I can say this confidently, but I'd like to think that things are changing or have changed a little bit, starting to change.
Conversation's definitely being had.
Yeah, because I think maybe 10, 15 years ago, very few men would admit to have, well, very few people, but especially men would admit to having mental health problems. Whereas now, it's still a long way to go, and there's still a lot of people that do feel hypermasculine and won't talk about and still see mental health issues as a weakness. But I think a lot more people are talking about it definitely now than before. So hopefully, it's a very, very, very slow, almost glacial progress. But if it keeps going in the same direction, then I think it will encourage people to say when they're struggling with mental health issues or to just speak openly about things. So I think hopefully things will improve over time. Celebrities, a lot more celebrities have come out talking about mental health issues.
That's the thing, celebrities, it's like, oh, are you getting a fucking paycheck to say this shit? Like, you know what I mean? I don't get it.
Yeah. So I've got some quite strong opinions on celebrities coming out with mental health issues. I'll tell you now, which is this. I think in theory, anybody talking about mental health, their mental health problems is a good thing, because in theory, it gives other people who are struggling a bit more permission and might encourage them to come out with their problems, which can only be a good thing in theory. But in practice, there's problems with it. First of all, if you're being cynical, it does seem, not all of them to be fair, but it seems that a lot of celebrities talk about their problems for a marketable reason. So if they're coming out with a book, that'd be a huge one, or an album, music, it seems to be the reason that they're talking about things, number one. And also, almost all of their stories are, I had this problem and then I recovered from it. I don't think I can think of any celebrity that's kind of talking about mental health while they're in the middle of a crisis or they haven't recovered from it, which is a problem because it might actually detract from people who are still suffering, who are not getting better or who are getting worse, because there's no recovery story for them. They only hear about things when celebrities have either got over anorexia or depression or alcoholism, blah, blah, blah. And finally, people with really
mad
severe...
true, by the way, as well,
Yeah. People with really severe mental illnesses. I'm not talking about a little bit of depression, I'm talking about schizophrenia, hearing voices, people that I assess, people that go in and out of prisons or in and out of hospitals. You don't have any representation from them. There's no celebrity that's got schizophrenia. I mean, actually, there is one or two like musicians, but nobody, and John Nash, the mathematician, but nobody in the public eye now, certainly, especially in the UK, that has this kind of illnesses. So I suppose the point I'm trying to make is, even though it's probably done with some good intention some of the time, I think it can actually alienate people that have very severe mental illnesses.
Makes sense. But yeah, as I said, like, I mean, the conversation should be had, but I feel like men have to do it with men, I think, because ultimately that's where the problem sort of lies, isn't it? Like you said, someone might feel masculine for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Obviously, the struggles of life. I mean, it's not easy for us, innit? Like, Doc, like, let's keep it real, man. We've been getting trashed and ruined. Men are trash. Like, who needs a man? Like, all these connotations are not helping, innit?
It's not easy for women in lots of other different ways.
No, definitely, yeah. I mean, women are kind of winning right now, man. I'll be honest, like, they're kind of up right now. Like, things are good for them right now. What do you think? Or...
it depends what you mean by things. I suppose if you're talking about like,
hey, man.
I suppose women would still say that, and they'd be correct in saying that the upper echelon of society is still very male dominated. There's still quite a lot of sexism in boardrooms, etc., etc. But it's definitely improving, even in like look at stuff like politics, number of women in the cabinet now compared to a generation ago. Yeah, absolutely, things are improving. Yeah, things are getting better. I don't know if it's fair to say they're equal, but they're getting better.
Well, I mean, it's going somewhere, I guess, at the very least. But then, I mean, we just have to. Men just always have to take the brunt of stuff, innit? Like the whole cheating thing. And anyway, I guess that's another that's for another conversation. But honestly, Doc, man, it's been amazing chatting to you, bro, man. I really enjoyed that, man. Really insightful, and yeah, man, I just always learn tons when I'm watching you and whatever. And even today, man, I took a lot from today, man. And I really appreciate your time, bro.
I appreciate you as well,
Absolutely,
man. Thank you very much, man.
Yeah, for sure. Peace.
Cheers.